the truth his mistress never knew. He bled his secrets to his 3 closest friends. She held the power to end his life as he knew it. Derek's restaurant had no sign out front. That was intentional. The building was technically a converted garage on land that the city was perpetually trying to rezone, and Derek, blessed with the kind of pragmatic genius that allowed him to operate in perpetual legal gray zones, had learned decades ago that anonymity was the only currency worth collecting in the restaurant business. Upstairs, behind a door with no nameplate, was a room that seated exactly 8. It had been their room since college. Whenever one of them was in trouble too large to carry alone, this was where they gathered. Michael Warren arrived 40 minutes before anyone else. He needed the time. He needed to sit in one of the worn leather chairs and stare at the exposed brick wall and try to arrange the words in his head before his friends walked in and saw everything on his face. He was 47 years old, a senior vice president at a management consulting firm that did work for half the Fortune 500, and he was, in every measurable way that mattered, standing at the edge of an abyss he had dug for himself with both hands and every conscious, deliberate step. He had not told his wife, Christine. He had not told his parents. He had not told his 16-year-old son, Jake, who idolized him in that quiet, unspoken way that teenage boys demonstrate love, through silence, through presence, through the absence of argument. He had told no one in his family, his firm, or his social world. He had told 3 people, Derek Foster, Ryan Howell, and Jessica Lynn. His friend since freshman year at the University of Pennsylvania. 29 years of accumulated history, secrets, embarrassments, and a kind of loyalty that could not be purchased or manufactured. They were the only people on earth he trusted with the thing that was about to end his life. Christine thought he was at a business dinner in Center City. That was plausible. His calendar said so. His calendar said a lot of things that were no longer true. The door opened, and Derek came in carrying 2 bottles of bourbon and a look of genuine concern. "You sounded like a man who'd swallowed a grenade on the phone," Derek said, setting the bottles on the table. He owned this place outright, the building, the business, the whole operation. He was the only one among them who had never pretended that money was something other than his primary interest. "What's going on, Michael?" "I need to tell you something," Michael said. "I need you to listen to all of it before you react." Derek studied him for a moment. Then he sat down, poured 2 glasses, and slid one across the table. "I'm listening." 20 minutes later, Ryan Howell arrived, tall, slightly gray at the temples now, wearing the rumpled Oxford shirt of a man who'd spent the day in depositions. Ryan was a partner at a mid-sized law firm in Old City, specializing in corporate litigation, the kind of attorney who charged $400 an hour to sit in rooms and listen to people lie. He'd been Michael's best friend since they were 18, and he'd seen Michael through his engagement to Christine, the birth of Jake, the promotion to VP, and the slow, invisible transformation of a young man with ambition into a middle-aged man with everything to lose. Ryan set his briefcase down and looked at Michael's face and the untouched bourbon and said, without sitting down, "This is bad." "It's very bad," Michael confirmed. The third to arrive was Jessica Lynn. She came through the door in heels and a cashmere coat, her dark hair pulled back, her expression already shifting into the particular mode it always took when one of her male friends was in emotional trouble, the blend of exasperation and loyalty that she had been dispensing since college. Jessica was a content strategist for a digital media company. She wrote copy that sold things to people, which meant she understood human motivation at a level that the rest of them found vaguely unsettling. She was also, as she often reminded them, the only woman in the room, which meant she saw things the men couldn't or wouldn't. She hung her coat on the back of a chair, poured herself a whiskey, and fixed Michael with the gaze that had been reducing grown men to stammering confessions since her 20s. "Start from the beginning," she said, "and spare nothing." Michael Warren had been a senior vice president at Carrington and Associates for 6 years. His office was on the 32nd floor of a glass tower in Center City, Philadelphia, with a view of the Schuylkill River that his wife Christine had once described as the kind of view that makes you feel like you've made it. He had a corner office, 2 direct reports, a company car that he drove mostly because Christine insisted he not take the train anymore, and a reputation for being the kind of man who could walk into a room full of frightened executives and make them believe that everything was going to be fine. He was good at his job. He had earned everything he had. And for 22 years of marriage, he had been, by any reasonable definition, a devoted husband and father. That was the part that made this so incomprehensible, even to himself. The affair had begun, as these things often do, with a professional engagement that felt entirely innocent. A conference on digital transformation in Atlantic City, October of 2 years ago. He was speaking on a panel about organizational change management. The conference was 3 days long, and on the second afternoon, during a break between sessions, a woman sitting 2 rows behind him leaned forward and asked if he could clarify something about the speaker's remarks on customer acquisition costs. Her name was Vanessa. Vanessa Moretti. She was 31. She was from Harlan, Kentucky, a small coal town in the eastern part of the state that had been hollowed out economically so thoroughly that he left at 18 and never looked back. Vanessa had left. She had gone to Lexington first, then Cincinnati, then Philadelphia, carrying a suitcase and a dream that she would become something more than the sum of her origins. She worked as a regional brand ambassador for a mid-tier cosmetics company, which meant she attended events like this conference, smile-polished, handing out samples, networking with the kind of women who had the disposable income to buy serums that cost more than her weekly grocery budget. She was not beautiful in the way that magazines defined beauty. She was not thin in the way that made people assume she had never worked a day in her life. She was pretty in the way that suggested effort, the kind of pretty that came from caring enormously about appearance, from hours in the gym and the careful application of makeup that cost more than her rent. She had wide dark eyes, full lips that she overlined with a precision that Michael found almost scientific in its dedication, and hair that she changed in color and style with the frequency that most people changed socks. She dressed well, always at the edge of what was appropriate for the setting, showing enough to suggest a body that she had earned through discipline, never quite crossing into territory that would cost her the professional credibility she was building. Michael answered her question about customer acquisition costs, and then he answered 3 more, and then, at the cocktail reception that evening, he found himself standing next to her at the bar explaining the difference between a pivot and a rebrand to a woman who listened to every word as though he were the most interesting person she had ever met. That was the hook. Not the body, not the youth, though both were factors he was man enough to acknowledge. It was the listening. Christine had stopped listening to him years ago, or perhaps she had never stopped and he had simply stopped noticing, because noticing required a vulnerability that a man deep in the performance of his own life could not afford. But Vanessa listened with her whole body. She leaned in. She laughed at the right moments, not the performative laugh of a woman angling for something, but the surprised, delighted laugh of someone who had genuinely not expected to be entertained. She asked follow-up questions. She remembered details. By the second glass of wine, Michael was telling her things about his marriage that he had not admitted to anyone, including himself. He was describing the polite distance that had developed between him and Christine over the years, not hostility, nothing that dramatic, just the quiet suffocation of 2 people who had become roommates who occasionally shared a bed. He was describing the loneliness of being the man everyone relied on and having no one to lean on. He was describing the terror of turning 50 and realizing that the life he had built looked exactly as he had planned it and felt like someone else's house. Vanessa touched his arm and said, "I think people forget how to be happy. They build these beautiful lives and then they forget to live in them." Michael wanted to kiss her right there, in front of 200 professionals and his firm's logo on the projection screen behind him. He didn't. He was careful. He was always careful. But that night, back in his hotel room, he could not stop thinking about her. And 2 weeks later, when she emailed him, casually, professionally, mentioning that she had enjoyed his panel and asking if he might recommend a few books on organizational leadership, he found himself typing back a response within minutes, and from that response a conversation grew, and from the conversation a lunch, and from the lunch a dinner, and from the dinner a night in a hotel room in Manayunk with the curtains drawn and his phone turned off, and from that night onward, everything in his carefully constructed life began, very quietly, to rot. Derek refilled the glasses. Jessica sat with her hands wrapped around her whiskey, her expression unreadable. Ryan had sat down at some point, though Michael couldn't pinpoint when. He was leaning back in his chair with the posture of a man who had heard too many terrible stories in too many conference rooms to be visibly shocked by any of them. 2 years, Jessica said. She said it flatly, without exclamation, which was worse than screaming. "You've been doing this for 2 years, and none of us had a clue. I didn't want anyone to know. Well, congratulations. Mission accomplished." She took a sip of whiskey. "How far along is she?" 4.5 months. 4.5 months, Jessica repeated, and something shifted in her face, the mask of professional detachment cracking just enough to reveal genuine horror underneath. "Michael, you let it go 4.5 months? I didn't know until 6 weeks ago. She didn't tell me right away." "Why not?" Michael closed his eyes. "She said she was scared. She said she didn't want to pressure me. She said," he stopped. "She said a lot of things. She played you," Jessica said. "She played you completely. A woman doesn't wait 2 months to tell the man whose baby she's carrying that she's pregnant unless she's using that time to build leverage. Michael, think about what you've just described. She had 2 months where you were coming to her apartment, sleeping with her, completely unaware that she was pregnant. During those 2 months, she was establishing the relationship, deepening the emotional bond, making herself indispensable to you. And then, once she knew you were thoroughly committed, she dropped the pregnancy on you like a bomb." "She didn't plan it," Michael said, but even as he said it, he heard how weak it sounded. "Michael." Jessica set her glass down with a precise, deliberate click. "She quit her birth control without telling you. I can practically guarantee it. This woman from Harlan, Kentucky, who is smart enough to network her way into conferences she has no business attending, who is calculating enough to target a senior executive at a consulting firm, who has been patient enough to maintain a 2-year affair with a married man who has shown zero intention of leaving his wife, is suddenly, by accident, pregnant. Please. She made this baby. She made this situation. She has been building a case for months, and you have been paying for it." Ryan spoke up. "What exactly does she want?" "She wants me to leave Christine," Michael said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "She wants to get married." The silence in the room had a weight to it. It pressed against the walls. Derek, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, leaned forward. "Have you told Christine?" "No." "Are you going to?" "I can't." "Michael," Ryan said, and his voice had the careful, measured quality of a man choosing each word like a surgeon choosing instruments. "You need to understand what you're actually dealing with here. This isn't a situation where there's a good outcome. There are only outcomes, and they're all bad. The question is which bad outcome you're going to choose and how much damage it's going to do before it's over. Michael nodded. He knew this. He had known this from the moment Vanessa had placed her hand on his chest and said, "I'm pregnant, Michael. We're having a baby," and he had felt the floor of his entire life drop away beneath him. He had known it, and he had said nothing. He had held her. He had told her it would be okay. And then he had gone home to his house in the suburbs, kissed his wife on the cheek, asked his son about his geometry test, and spent the next 6 weeks pretending that the baby growing inside Vanessa Moretti did not exist. The apartment was in University City, on the 4th floor of a building that rented primarily to graduate students and young professionals who were not yet old enough to know that they deserved better. It was small, a 1-bedroom with a kitchen that consisted mostly of a narrow galley and a refrigerator that hummed constantly like a machine operating just beyond the edge of failure. Vanessa had decorated it with the determined cheerfulness of a woman who refused to admit that she was living in a place that cost her more than she could comfortably afford. There were candles everywhere. There were plants on the windowsill, all of them the kind of hardy, forgiving varieties that could survive a regular watering and the particular quality of light that came through windows facing other windows. There were photographs pinned to a corkboard by the desk, Vanessa at a cosmetics trade show, Vanessa at what appeared to be a wedding, Vanessa with her arm around an older woman who was unmistakably her mother. And then, in the corner of the board, pinned where Michael would see it every time he walked in, a photograph of the two of them. It was not a sexual photograph. It was, if anything, almost aggressively wholesome. Michael was sitting at a small table in what appeared to be a coffee shop, and Vanessa was standing behind him with her hands on his shoulders, both of them smiling. It looked like a photo you would send to your grandmother. It looked like a photo that belonged in a family album. Michael had not given her permission to take the photo. He had not known she was taking it. She had done it one morning when he had come to the apartment for breakfast, a rare occasion when he had stayed past 9, and he had been half asleep at the table, reading something on his phone, and she had come up behind him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders and snapped the picture with her own phone before he could react. "Why did you take that?" he had asked, startled. "Because I love you," she had said, simply, as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. "And I want to remember this." The photograph was Vanessa's idea of a label. It was her way of saying, "This is real. This is not a secret. This is a life." The night she told him she was pregnant, she had made dinner, slightly overcooked pasta and a salad that was mostly arugula and too much lemon, and she had sat across from him at the small table by the window and told him, in a voice that was steady and clear and absolutely certain of what she was saying, that she was keeping the baby. Michael had set down his fork. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Vanessa, we talked about this. We agreed. We agreed to be careful," she said. "I was careful. Things happen. Things don't just happen. You said you were on the pill." She had looked at him then with an expression that he did not fully understand, a flicker of something behind her eyes that might have been guilt or might have been triumph or might have been nothing at all, and she had said, "Sometimes things don't work the way they're supposed to." He had not pressed the question. He had not wanted to know the answer. He had told himself that it didn't matter, that the cause was less important than the consequence, which was that Vanessa was pregnant with his child and she was going to have it regardless of what he wanted. He had told himself that it was his fault too, that he should have been more careful, that a man in his position had no business trusting anyone else with his reproductive future. But Christine had been on the pill when they had Jake, and that had worked the first time. You did not accidentally get a woman pregnant when you were using protection unless the protection failed or someone wanted a baby badly enough to disable it. Michael had not allowed himself to follow that thought to its conclusion. He was not ready to believe that the woman he had been sleeping with for 2 years, the woman who cried when he read aloud to her from books he thought she wouldn't understand, the woman who had told him she loved him with a sincerity that seemed impossible to fake, that woman had deliberately sabotaged their contraceptive arrangement in order to trap him into a life he had never agreed to live. But the end was accumulating, and it was accumulating in the form of Vanessa's behavior over the following weeks. She had started, subtly at first, to reshape the narrative of their relationship. She posted things on social media, not tagged, not explicitly identifying Michael, but visible to the small audience of her friends and followers, which included some people from her professional world who would, in the ordinary course of events, never connect her to a married man in Philadelphia. But never was a word that Michael had learned to distrust. She posted a photo of a bouquet of flowers with no caption. 2 days later, she posted a photo of an ultrasound image with the caption, "Our little secret." 3 days after that, she posted a photo of a pair of men's loafers sitting on the hardwood floor of what was unmistakably her apartment, loafers that Michael recognized because he had bought them at a shop in Rittenhouse Square 6 months ago, and he had taken them off in her hallway and left them there because she had asked him to start leaving a few things at her place so it would feel more like a shared home. "You need to take those shoes back," Ryan said. They were on the second hour of this conversation, and the bourbon was down by a third. If she posts that photo and anyone in your orbit sees it, your wife, your assistant, one of your partners, and recognizes those shoes or the floor or the light, you're done. "I know." "Then why are they still there?" Michael didn't answer. "Because she's already posted them and you can't take it back," Derek said, reading the look on Michael's face. "She beat you to it. She's already put something out there that you can't retrieve. That's the whole point, Michael. She knows you're a careful man. She's been building a case, documenting your relationship in ways you can't deny. She's protecting herself." "Protecting herself from what?" "From you," Jessica said. "From the possibility that you decide to walk away. She knows, you know this, right? She knows that if you wanted to, you could deny everything. You could tell her to get lost, pay her some money, and disappear. You have more to lose than she does. So she's building a paper trail. She is creating a record that makes it impossible for you to deny her without destroying yourself in the process. Smart. Ruthless. Effective." Michael put his head in his hands. "She also filed for divorce," he said, quietly. The room went still. "What do you mean, she filed for divorce?" Ryan asked. "Her husband, Marco. She filed for divorce 3 weeks ago. She told me yesterday." Derek whistled low. "So she's burning her whole life down. She's been sleeping in a separate bedroom from him for months," Michael said. "She told me their marriage was over long before she and I started. She said she was only staying on paper until she got her finances in order." "And you believed her?" Jessica asked. "I wanted to believe her." Jessica shook her head. "Michael, a woman who is truly trapped in a bad marriage does not wait 2 years to file for divorce. A woman who is truly free of her husband does not need to hide a pregnancy and relationship with a married man. Vanessa Moretti didn't file for divorce because her marriage was over. She filed for divorce because she needed a clean legal status before she could make her move. She was waiting until she had the pregnancy established. She was waiting until you were so emotionally invested that you couldn't easily walk away. And then she filed, not because she needed to, but because she needed to think that she needed to. She needed you to see her as a woman who was making a sacrifice, who was leaving her marriage to be with you, so that when she presented you with the ultimatum, you would feel like the villain if you said no. She's not wrong, Michael said. I would be the villain. You already are, Jessica said, gently. You've been the villain since you walked into that hotel room in Atlantic City. The question is whether you're going to keep being the villain to everyone, Christine, Jake, Vanessa, or whether you're going to choose one direction and accept the damage. There was a moment, about 40 minutes into the meal, when Derek's wife Carmen came up from the kitchen with the fourth course and gave Michael a long, searching look before setting the plate down in front of him, that Michael understood something about himself with a clarity that he had been avoiding for 2 years. Carmen looked at him the way women look at men they suspect are lying. It was the same look Christine had given him once, years ago, in the aftermath of the thing with the intern, the look that said, I am not stupid, and I am not blind, and the only thing keeping me from saying what I know is the fact that I have decided, for reasons of my own, to let you keep your lie intact. Michael had looked away. He had never discussed the intern thing with anyone except the men in this room, and even then, he had told it as a story about temptation and willpower and the importance of resisting, rather than the full and humiliating truth, which was that he had been weak. He had been weak, and Christine had known, and she had chosen to forgive him, and he had spent the years since then performing the role of a man who had learned from his mistakes, and he had been so good at the performance that he had almost convinced himself it was real. Until Vanessa. Carmen set down the plates and went back downstairs. The four of them sat in the warm, fragrant quiet of the room, surrounded by the smell of garlic and olive oil and the particular staleness of a space that had been used for too many difficult conversations over too many years. Let me make sure I understand the full scope of this, Ryan said. He was the lawyer, after all, the man whose job it was to understand the full scope of things. You have been seeing Vanessa for 2 years. She has recently filed for divorce from her husband. She is 4.5 months pregnant with your child. She has begun, in subtle ways, to document your relationship on social media. She has told you, explicitly, that she wants you to leave your wife and marry her. You do not want to leave your wife. You do not want to marry her. And your wife currently has no idea that any of this is happening. That's correct. Okay. Ryan leaned forward, interlacing his fingers. Let's talk about your options. And I want you to listen carefully, because none of them are good, and you're going to hate every single one of them. Believe me, Michael said, I already hate all of them. Then you're in the right frame of mind. Ryan ticked them off on his fingers. Option 1. You pay Vanessa to terminate the pregnancy. You give her a significant sum of money, enough to make it worth her while, and you convince her, through whatever combination of persuasion and financial incentive, to have an abortion and go away. She disappears. You go back to your life. Christine never knows. Jake never knows. Your career continues on its current trajectory. You live the rest of your life knowing that you paid a woman to kill your unborn child, and you carry that with you until you die. The room was silent. Option 2. You refuse to leave Christine. You tell Vanessa that you will not divorce your wife, that you will not marry her, that she needs to make whatever decision she wants to make about the baby, but you are not going to be the man who destroys his family for her. She may or may not keep the baby. If she keeps the baby, she will at some point tell Christine, or she will tell your employer, or she will tell both. Your marriage ends. Your relationship with Jake is probably permanently damaged. Your career takes a significant hit, possibly a fatal one, depending on how your firm reacts to a scandal involving a senior executive. You co-parent a child with a woman you don't love from a situation you never wanted. Michael stared at the table. Option 3, Ryan continued. You leave Christine. You file for divorce. You do the thing that Vanessa wants and that you have spent 2 years avoiding. You lose half your assets, probably more, because Pennsylvania is not a kind state to men in your income bracket when it comes to division of property. You lose significant time with Jake. You lose your reputation, at least temporarily, within your firm and your community. You marry Vanessa. You raise a child with a woman you are not in love with, and a family structure that was built on coercion and desperation rather than any natural alliance of two people who genuinely chose each other. And you do all of this knowing that Vanessa engineered this outcome deliberately, and that the foundation of your new life is a lie. That one destroys everything immediately, Derek said. At least with option 2, you get to keep your career and some semblance of a relationship with your son. I'm not done, Ryan said. Option 4. You tell Christine everything yourself, voluntarily, before Vanessa does it to you. You get ahead of it. You sit Christine down and you tell her about the affair, about the pregnancy, about everything. You ask for her forgiveness. You offer her whatever she needs, in terms of transparency, in terms of financial security, in terms of assurances about your commitment to her and your family, to get through this together as a united front. And then the two of you, together, go to Vanessa and make it clear that she can have whatever financial arrangement she wants, but she is not going to break up your marriage. Christine stands next to you when you tell Vanessa that you are not leaving your wife, and Vanessa sees, with her own eyes, that the fantasy she has been building, the fantasy of Michael Warren as a man who will choose her, who will sacrifice everything for her, is not going to become real. And then you deal with whatever the consequences of the affair are within your marriage, on your own terms, with your wife on your side rather than in the enemy camp. That requires Christine to forgive him, Jessica said. Again. It does. She already forgave him once. For the intern. And she may not forgive him again, Ryan acknowledged. But the alternative is that Vanessa tells her, and Christine finds out not just about the affair but about the pregnancy and about the fact that Michael hid it from her for weeks, and then the betrayal is compounded by the deception, and that is a much harder thing to come back from. Michael felt something shift in his chest, a sensation he associated, distantly, with the feeling of a decision being made before the mind had consciously arrived at it. Derek stood up and went to the window. He stood there for a long moment, looking out at the street below, where a delivery truck was double parked and a man in a fluorescent vest was arguing with the driver about the width of the loading zone. Derek watched this absurd drama with the attention of a man who needed to look anywhere except at his friend's face. "Can I say something?" Derek asked, without turning around. "Please." "I think Ryan's option 4 is the only one that preserves your basic human dignity, even if it destroys everything else. Paying Vanessa to get an abortion is something you can't come back from as a person. It works as a strategy, but it hollows you out. I've seen it happen. I watched my father do something like that, pay a woman to disappear her problem, and it turned him into a ghost. He lived another 30 years after that, but he was never really alive again. There was just this absence at the center of him. Like a room in a house where the furniture had been removed and the curtains nailed shut." Derek turned around. Option 2, letting Vanessa burn everything down, is cowardly in a different way. You're letting someone else control the outcome. You're letting Vanessa decide when and how your life ends, and that's a surrender of agency that I don't think you can afford, because you're already a man who has spent so long performing the role of someone in control that I genuinely don't know what you'd become if you had to face the world without the costume." "And option 3? Michael asked. Derek smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Option 3 is the nuclear option. You don't choose it because it's right. You choose it because you're out of good choices and you want the pain to be over. It's not a decision. It's a collapse. That leaves option 4, Michael said. Option 4 is terrifying, Derek said. Because it requires you to walk into the worst room in your life, the room where Christine is sitting, where Jake is sitting, where your marriage is on the table, and sit down and tell the truth. And the truth is ugly, and Christine is going to be hurt in a way that you cannot undo, and Jake may never forgive you, and you might lose everything anyway. But at least you walk into that room as yourself. You don't walk in as the man who paid for an abortion, or the man who let his life explode, or the man who abandoned his family for a woman who trapped him. You walk in as a man who made a terrible mistake and is finally, after 2 years of lying, ready to face the consequences. Michael looked at Jessica. Tell me I'm not crazy, he said. Tell me that what Vanessa did, what she did to get pregnant, what she's been doing with the social media, what she's been planning, that tells you that she is not a woman who is in love. She is a woman who is strategizing. She is playing a game, and she has been playing it since the beginning, and everything I thought was real between us, every conversation, every moment of connection, every time she told me she loved me and I believed her, was just practice. Rehearsal for the performance she was always going to deliver when the time was right. Jessica looked at him for a long time. Michael, she said, carefully, I think you know the answer to that question. And I think the fact that you're asking it, to me, tonight, after everything, is the clearest sign that you already know what you need to do. She told me she loved me, Michael said. His voice cracked, and he hated himself for it. She used to cry when I read to her. She'd lie her head on my chest and I'd read something, I don't know, whatever she was reading, and she'd just cry. Quietly. Like something in the words was breaking her open. And I'd think, nobody cries like that unless they mean it. Unless the thing that's breaking them open is real. It can be both, Jessica said, softly. It can be real, and it can still be a strategy. People are not simple, Mako. A woman can love you and still be manipulating you. She can be genuine in her feelings and still be using those feelings as a tool. Vanessa is from a place where she has had to fight for everything her entire life. She has had to be smart and cunning and patient, and she has learned, because she had no choice, that the most effective way to get what you want from someone is to make them believe that you need them. She learned that lesson in Harlan, or in Lexington, or in Cincinnati, or here in Philadelphia. She learned it the hard way, the only way people like Vanessa learn anything. And she applied that lesson to you. It doesn't mean she doesn't love you. It means she's a human being who has survived by being strategic, and she applied her survival skills to the most important relationship of her life. And what does that tell me about what to do? It tells you that she is not going to stop, Jessica said. She is not going to have an abortion because you ask her to. She is not going to accept money and disappear. She is not going to give you a graceful exit from this situation. She has burned her bridges to her husband, she is carrying your child, and she has spent 2 years building a narrative in which she is the heroine of a love story, a woman who left everything for the man she loved, and you are either going to fulfill that narrative or you are going to become the villain of it. She will not allow you to be the hero of a different story. She has already cast you. The only question is whether you're going to stay in her movie or walk out of it. Michael drove home that night on the Broad Street line and then walked the last 6 blocks because he could not bear to be in the car, could not bear to sit in the passenger compartment that Christine had picked up the leather seats for, could not bear the enclosed space in which every surface was an artifact of the life he was about to destroy. The house was dark when he arrived. Christine had gone to bed. Jake's light was off. The kitchen was clean. The coffee maker was set to brew at 6:15, which was 20 minutes earlier than Christine needed it, because Jake liked his coffee at exactly 6:30 before his early morning practice, and Christine had adjusted the timer so the pot would be ready. This was the kind of detail that made Michael want to weep. Christine had not set that timer for herself. She had set it for their son. She had built her entire adult life around the rhythms of other people's needs: Jake's practice schedule, Michael's travel calendar, the dog who needed to be walked at 7, the neighbor's cat who came by on Tuesdays for the leftover chicken. She had transformed herself, through 22 years of marriage and 16 years of motherhood, into a woman whose entire existence was organized around the happiness of her family, and she had done it without complaint, without fanfare, without ever once sitting down at the kitchen table and saying, "What about me?" And Michael had looked at that woman, that extraordinary, invisible woman, and he had decided that she was not enough. He sat in the dark living room for an hour. The house was quiet in the way that houses are quiet at midnight, with the particular silence of a family that is sleeping safely inside its own walls, trusting the locks and the alarm system and the street lights outside to keep the world at bay. He sat there and he listened to the house breathe, the refrigerator cycling on, the faint settling of the old radiator in the walls, the tick of the hallway clock that Christine's mother had given them as a wedding gift 22 years ago. He thought about the baby in Vanessa's belly, 4.5 months along, just past the point where a medical termination would be considered dangerous, where the procedure transitioned from a clinic visit to something more closely resembling a delivery. Vanessa had told him that. She had looked it up. She had told him with the clinical precision of a woman who had already done the research, who had already accounted for the timeline, who had known exactly how many weeks she could wait before Michael's options narrowed to the ones that involved more risk and more pain and more irreversible consequence. That was when he knew. Not when she told him she was pregnant, not when she filed for divorce, not when he saw the ultrasound photo on her phone, but now, sitting in his dark living room at midnight, listening to his wife's house breathe, understanding with a clarity that felt like a blade that Vanessa had planned every moment of this. She had planned the timing of the revelation. She had planned the window in which he could still make choices. She had planned the narrowing of his options until the only ones left were the ones she wanted him to take. She had planned for him to be trapped. And he had walked into the trap with his eyes open, because she had made it feel like love, because she had made it feel like the first real thing that had happened to him in years, because she had given him the one thing that his marriage had stopped providing, the feeling of being seen. He understood, in this moment, that he had been a fool. He had been a fool in the most ancient and predictable way, a man in his middle age, looking at the woman who had built a life with him and finding her insufficient, choosing instead a younger woman who reflected his vanity back at him in the most flattering possible light. He had not been a victim of Vanessa's scheming. He had been an enthusiastic participant in his own deception, and he had continued to participate even He had chosen the comfort of the lie over the terror of the truth, and the lie had compounded interest for 2 years, and now the bill was due. Christine came downstairs at 6:14, which was a minute before the coffee maker finished brewing, which meant she had been awake for at least 10 minutes and had been waiting for the sounds of the machine to stop before she came down. She was wearing the old pen sweatshirt that she had owned since graduate school, the one with the fraying cuffs and the faded logo, and her hair was pulled back with a clip that Jake had given her for Mother's Day 3 years ago and that she wore every morning without exception. She looked at Michael sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in his hands and she said, "You're up early." "I didn't sleep. Is everything okay?" It was a question that Christine asked every morning, in much the same tone that she asked how he slept or whether the traffic was bad, automatic, perfunctory, a verbal gesture toward caring that had been worn smooth by repetition into something that barely registered as language anymore. She didn't really want to know if everything was okay. She assumed it was, because that was the routine, and the routine was the scaffolding that held their marriage together when the real structure had long since developed cracks. Michael looked at his wife. She was 51 years old. She had been beautiful once in a way that was sharp and striking, the kind of beauty that made people turn their heads in rooms, and she was still beautiful now, but differently, in the way that a landscape is beautiful in late afternoon, when the light has gone golden and the sharp edges have softened and there is a depth and a patience to it that wasn't there in the morning. She had lines around her eyes now. She had a few more pounds around her middle than she had at 35, and she no longer wore the fitted blazers that she used to wear, and she had stopped coloring her hair 3 years ago and now let it go silver at the temples in a way that she had once said made her feel like a different person, someone she didn't mind being. She was standing in her own kitchen, in the house they had bought together 16 years ago, making coffee for her son, and she had no idea that a woman in University City was waking up in a one-bedroom apartment and posting photographs of a future that was supposed to include Michael Warren and his children and his name on the lease and his face in her family album. "Christine," he said, "I need to tell you something. And I need you to sit down before I tell you, because once I start I don't think I'm going to be able to stop, and I need you to be sitting down." Christine's hand was on the counter. She did not move it. "What is it?" she said, and her voice was calm, and Michael recognized that calm. It was the same calm she had used in the aftermath of the intern thing 7 years ago, when he had come home and told her the story he had rehearsed in the car, a story that was mostly true except for the part where he claimed they had only kissed, and Christine had listened to the whole thing without interrupting and without crying and without screaming, and then she had gone upstairs and closed the guest room door and stayed in there for 2 days except to take Jake to school and pick him up. Again. She had that calm now. The calm of a woman who had been bracing for impact and had finally, after years of suspicion, heard the first sound of the thing arriving. "Sit down," Michael said. "Please." She sat down. Michael told her everything. He told her about the conference in Atlantic City and the woman at the bar and the conversation about happiness and the book recommendations. He told her about the lunches and the dinners and the hotel in Manayong. He told her about the apartment in University City and the money, Jesus, the money, $30,000 he had given Vanessa for a business she was never going to open, money that should have been in the college fund for Jake, money that was sitting in a checking account that Vanessa could drain tomorrow if she decided to. He told her about the photograph on the corkboard and the loafers by the door. He told her about the pregnancy, and when he said the words, "She's 4.5 months pregnant," he watched something happen to Christine's face that he had never seen before, a transformation so sudden and so complete that it was like watching a building collapse in a controlled demolition, one support giving way after another in perfect sequence until the whole structure was simply gone. She did not cry. She did not scream. She sat very still with her hands flat on the table and she said, "How long?" 2 years. 2 years. She repeated it as though she were testing the weight of the words. 2 years. "You've been," she stopped. She started again. 2 years, and I've been here. I've been here making Jake's lunches and driving him to practice and sleeping next to you in the dark, and you've been. Christine. Don't. She held up a hand. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the counter, at the coffee maker, at the window above the sink where the morning light was coming through and catching the edge of the pen sweatshirt and turning it briefly, almost imperceptibly, "Gordon. Does Jake know?" "No. No one knows. I told Derek, Ryan, and Jessica last night." They're the only people I've told. Christine nodded. She stood up. She walked to the kitchen sink and she gripped the edge of it with both hands and she stared out the window at the backyard, where the oak tree they had planted when Jake was born was casting long morning shadows across the grass. Is she going to keep it? Christine asked. Her voice was very quiet. Yes. Does she want to marry you? Yes. Do you? Christine stopped. She pressed her fingers against her eyes. Do you want to marry her? No, Michael said. He said it clearly and without hesitation. No. I want to be here. I want to be in this house with you and Jake, and I want this to not have happened, and I want to take every step I took in the last 2 years and walk them backward until I'm standing in this kitchen, and I've never been in Vanessa's apartment, and I've never betrayed you like this. But I can't do that. I can only tell you the truth now, and the truth is that I have made the worst mistake of my life, and I am asking you, not expecting, not demanding, I'm asking you to consider whether there is any version of our marriage that survives this. Because I know there may not be. I know that after everything, after the intern and now this, you may decide that I am not worth another chance. And if that's your decision, I will respect it. I will leave. I will give you the house and custody of Jake and whatever you need to build a life without me in it. But I wanted you to hear it from me. I wanted you to know that I am telling you this because I choose you, Christine. Not because Vanessa forced my hand or because I got caught. I'm telling you because I should have told you a long time ago, and I was too much of a coward, and I am sorry. I am so sorry. Christine stood with her back to him for a long time. The clock on the wall ticked. Somewhere upstairs, Jake's alarm went off. He had 17 minutes before it would go off again, a sneeze cycle he had maintained with the religious discipline of a monk since he was 14. Christine turned around. The baby, she said. If Vanessa has the baby, if she keeps it, then that child is your child. Legally, emotionally, in every way that matters, that is your child. You understand that, don't you? You can't just write that off. You can't just write that woman and that child out of your life like there's a spreadsheet error you can correct. There's a person in there, Michael. A child. Your child. And whatever happens to us, to our marriage, that child exists. And that child is going to need things from you for the rest of your life. Are you ready for that? Have you thought about what that actually looks like? I know, Michael said. I've known since she told me. I can't undo it. I can only. You can only decide what kind of man you're going to be about it. Christine's voice was flat. And for the record, the kind of man who tells his wife the truth, even when it's devastating, is marginally better than the kind of man who lets his mistress tell his wife for him. So there's that. She walked out of the kitchen. She went upstairs. She was in the master bedroom for 45 minutes. When she came back down, she was dressed, and her face was composed into something that looked almost like calm but was actually, Michael recognized, the face of a woman who had cried so hard and for so long in the bathroom that she had burned through every tear she had and emerged on the other side into a place that was beyond tears, a place of exhausted, surgical clarity. I need time, she said. I'm not making any decisions right now. I'm not deciding whether to stay or go, whether to forgive or leave, whether to fight for this marriage or walk away from it. I need time to understand what I'm dealing with. And you need to understand that the fact that I'm even willing to consider time, that I'm not getting in the car and driving to my sister's house in Delaware right now, is not a sign that I've forgiven you. It's a sign that I'm not a person who makes decisions in a crisis. It's a sign that I'm methodical. It is not a sign of love, Michael. Don't mistake my process for love. I understand. I don't think you do. But that's okay. You'll learn. She picked up her bag and her keys and she walked out the front door and she drove to work, to the office she had worked at for 18 years, where she was the director of development for a non-profit that provided legal services to immigrants, a job that she was extraordinary at and that paid her so little that they qualified for financial aid at Jake's school. She drove away from the house and the car she had owned for 7 years, with the dent in the rear bumper from the time she had backed into a parking garage pillar, and Michael watched her go and he understood that whatever came next, whatever she decided, whatever she determined was possible or impossible, bearable or unbearable, the woman who had just walked out that door was not the woman he had married. That woman had him, and he had broken something that she was not going to be able to unbreak, no matter how much time she took, no matter how methodical her process. Jake came downstairs 20 minutes later with his headphones in, scrolling through his phone with a distracted, half-present awareness of a 16-year-old boy who had not yet learned that the world was anything other than safe and ordered and fundamentally just. He poured himself a bowl of cereal and sat across from Michael at the kitchen table and said, "Where's Mom?" "She went to work early." "Okay." Jake chewed. He looked at his phone. He chewed some more. "Did something happen? You look weird." "I'm fine," Michael said. "Just didn't sleep well." Jake shrugged and went back to his cereal and his phone, and Michael sat across from his son and felt the full weight of what he had done settle onto his shoulders like a physical thing, like a coat made of lead. Everything he had built, all the small, ordinary moments of family life that he had allowed himself to take for granted because they were always there, because they were as reliable as gravity, his son asking about his geometry test, his wife setting the coffee maker, the morning light in the kitchen, the sound of the house breathing, all of it had been built on a foundation that he had been secretly, systematically undermining for 2 years, and now the foundation was gone, and the house was still standing, but it was standing on nothing, and he was the only person in the world who knew. Jake finished his cereal, rinsed the bowl, put it in the dishwasher, a small, automatic act of participation in the household that Michael had trained him to do through years of gentle, persistent reminders. And then he picked up his backpack and his lacrosse stick and he said, "Love you, Dad," and he walked out the front door and down the driveway to wait for the bus. "Love you too," Michael said. And then he was alone in the house. He called Vanessa. He had not planned to call her. He had planned to go to work and sit in his corner office and look at the view of the Schuylkill River and pretend that everything was fine until Christine had had enough time to process and decide what she was going to do. But sitting alone in the kitchen, with Jake's empty cereal bowl still on the table and Christine's absence filling every room of the house, he picked up his phone and he called Vanessa, because he needed to hear a voice that was not the voice of the disaster he had created. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Hi," she said, and she sounded sleepy and warm and pleased, and Michael could picture her in the bed in the apartment in University City, tangled in sheets that smelled like the two of them, her hand on her belly where his child was growing, her face soft with the particular contentment of a woman who wakes up believing that her life is about to become exactly what she has always wanted it to be. "I need to see you," he said. "When?" "Today. As soon as possible." There was a pause. Michael could hear something shifting in the quality of her breathing, a subtle change, the intake of breath that precedes a question you already know the answer to. "Is everything okay?" she asked. No, he thought. Nothing is okay. Nothing has been okay for 2 years. I have been living inside a lie I told myself so thoroughly that I forgot it was a lie, and now my wife knows, and my marriage is over, and there is a baby in your belly that neither of us is ready for, and I am calling you because I don't know what else to do. "I need to see you," he said again. "Please." "Come at noon," she said. "I'll be here." He went to the apartment at noon. He let himself in with the key she had given him 8 months ago, a key to a door behind which his future was being held hostage by a woman who had learned, somewhere in the small towns and big cities of her difficult life, that the most effective way to control a man was to make him believe that he was already home. She was sitting at the small table by the window. She was wearing the blue sweater he had bought her for her birthday, the one she said was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever given her, and her hands were folded on the table in front of her in a way that suggested she had been sitting like that for some time, waiting, composing herself, preparing for the conversation she had known was coming. He sat down across from her. "I told Christine," he said. The words landed in the room like stones dropped into still water. Vanessa did not move. "When?" "This morning." And Michael stopped. "She's processing. She's not making any decisions right now. She needs time." Vanessa nodded slowly. She looked down at her hands. The blue sweater was slightly too large for her, and the sleeves kept sliding past her wrists, and she pushed them up with a gesture that was so familiar, so achingly familiar, that Michael felt something twist in his chest. "She found out about the baby?" "Yes." "Does she hate me?" "I don't know. She probably does." Vanessa looked up. Her eyes were wet, but no tears were falling. "She probably thinks I'm a monster. She probably thinks I stole her husband. And she's right. I did. I know what I did. I know it was wrong. But Michael," her voice broke, "I love you. I've loved you since that conference. I didn't plan to fall in love with you. I didn't plan any of this. I was just a woman at a conference listening to a man talk about change management, and I thought, God, he's so brilliant. He's so alive. And then you talked to me like I mattered, like what I thought was interesting, and I thought, Vanessa." He said her name gently. "Stop." She stopped. "I know," he said. "I know you love me. I'm not questioning that. I'm not saying it wasn't real. But I need you to hear something, and I need you to hear it clearly, because I have not been clear with you, and that has been unfair to both you and Christine and everyone involved." She waited. "I am not leaving my wife. I am not divorcing Christine. I am not going to marry you." He said each sentence with a clarity and a firmness that he did not know he possessed, a certainty that came from somewhere deeper than his own mind, from the place where he had sat in his kitchen at midnight and finally understood the shape of his own moral failure. "I will take responsibility for the baby. I will be present in that child's life. I will provide financially. I will be there. But I am not building a life with you. That was never the agreement, and I should have made that clearer a long time ago, and my failure to make it clear is my fault, and I am sorry for it. But that is where I am. That is who I am. And I need you to know that so you can make your own decisions about what happens next." Vanessa sat very still. The morning light came through the window behind her and lit the edges of her hair and turned the blue of the sweater almost turquoise, and Michael looked at her and he thought, "She is beautiful, and she is alone, and she did a terrible thing to get what she wanted, and the terrible thing is going to be with both of them for the rest of their lives." "Okay," she said, quietly. "Okay? Okay." She uncrossed her arms and placed her hands flat on the table, the same gesture Christine had made in the kitchen this morning, and Michael was struck by the similarity, not in appearance, not in personality, but in the fundamental human response to devastation, which was always the same, hands on a surface, grounding yourself against the collapse. "I didn't think you were going to leave her. I think I knew. I think I always knew. But I need needed to, she paused. I needed to try. I needed to see if there was a version of this where I got what I wanted. And now I know there isn't. So I'll have the baby. I'll raise the baby. I'll figure it out. And you'll be, she swallowed. You'll be the father. You'll be in the child's life. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all I can have, and I need to learn to be okay with that. You'll always be in my life, Michael said. The child will make sure of that. But Vanessa, you can't post things about us anymore. You have to take down the photographs. The loafer's photo, the ultrasound, all of it. Christine is already, he stopped. Christine is dealing with this. If she sees more evidence, if she sees you and me being publicly identified as a couple, it will make reconciliation impossible. And right now, I'm asking her to consider reconciliation. I'm not asking her to forgive me. I'm asking her to consider whether there's a marriage worth saving. And I need you to give me the space to do that. Vanessa looked at him for a long time. You're still protecting her, she said. Even now. Even after everything. You're protecting Christine. Yes, Michael said. I am. Because she is my wife, and because I owe her that, and because this morning she could have left me and she didn't. She sat down and she listened, and that is the most generous thing anyone has ever done for me, and I am not going to repay her generosity by continuing to give you pieces of my life that belong to her. Vanessa nodded. She picked up her phone from the table and she unlocked it and she handed it to Michael. He looked at the screen. The photographs were still there. The flowers, the ultrasound, the loafers, the handwritten note she had photographed and posted with the caption, "Some mornings are worth waking up for." Delete them, he said. She watched him do it. One by one, he tapped on the photographs and selected delete, and the images disappeared into the digital void of a phone's memory, and Vanessa sat across from him with her hands folded and her eyes dry and her blue sweater slipping off her shoulders. And when he was done, she said, very softly, I wish I had met you before she did. The words hung in the air between them, and Michael did not know what to say to them, because they were true, and because the truest things are always the ones that can never be fixed. He went home that evening. Christine was there. She was sitting in the living room with a glass of wine and a book that she was not reading. She was staring at the same page she had been staring at when he walked in, 20 minutes earlier, and she had not turned at once. He sat down in the armchair across from her. He did not pour himself a drink. I went to see Vanessa, he said. I told her I am not leaving you. I told her I will be in the child's life, but not in the way she wanted. I asked her to take down the photographs and the posts, and she did. Christine looked up from her book. Her eyes were red-rimmed but not swollen. She had been crying, but she had stopped, and she was in a phase of grief that involved a careful, deliberate rebuilding of composure, picking up the pieces of yourself that had scattered and fitting them back together with a precision that was itself a form of defiance. How did she take it? As well as could be expected. She didn't scream. She didn't threaten me. She just accepted it. Women like her don't just accept things, Christine said. Women like her don't spend 2 years building a strategy and then fold the second the man says no. That's not how it works. I'm not sure what else she can do at this point. She's pregnant, Michael. She's carrying your child. She has a husband she's divorcing and no family in this city and no job security, and she's 31 years old with a baby on the way and a man who just told her he won't leave his wife. That's not a woman who has run out of options. That's a woman who is going to be in your life, and in my life, and in our family's life, in ways we can't even anticipate yet. You understand that, don't you? This is not over. This is just beginning. I know. Do you? Because I'm sitting here thinking about the next 18 years. I'm thinking about birthday parties that your child Vanessa will want to attend because children don't understand why their father lives in two different houses. I'm thinking about holidays. I'm thinking about school events where I might run into a woman who tried to destroy my marriage, standing next to a child who is my husband's son. I'm thinking about the day that child asked Jake why his mother and father are not together, and whether Jake will have the maturity to not blame that child for something they had no control over. I'm thinking about the next 20 years, Michael. I'm thinking about every single day of the next 20 years. And I'm trying to figure out if there is a version of my life, a version where I stay married to you, that I can actually tolerate. Michael said nothing. He sat in the armchair and he let his wife say the things that needed to be said, and he did not defend himself, and he did not make excuses, and he did not try to make it better, because he knew that there was nothing he could say that would make any of it better, and the only honest thing he could do was sit there and let her grieve the marriage she had thought she had. I'm not leaving tonight, Christine said, finally. But I'm not forgiving you tonight either. I need you to understand that staying in this house is not the same as staying in this marriage. I am in a place of uncertainty, and I am going to stay there for as long as I need to, and you are going to have to be okay with that. You are going to have to be okay with me not knowing, for now, whether this is something I can survive. And if it turns out I can't, if 6 months from now or a year from now I realize that I cannot look at you without thinking about what you did, then you're going to have to accept that, and you're going to have to let me go, gracefully. I can do that, Michael said. Can you? Can you really? Christine closed her book. Because I have been the one holding this family together for 22 years, Michael. I had been the one who noticed when Jake was struggling in school, and I have been the one who planned every birthday party and attended every parent-teacher conference and managed every household repair and sat up with you when your father was dying and held your hand in the hospital when they told you the biopsy was negative. I have been the architect of this family, and you have been, what? The visiting relative? The weekend father who was always at work? The man who came home to a finished house and a made bed and a wife who had everything under control and thought that was enough? And now I'm supposed to add your mistress's baby to my list of things to manage? I'm supposed to co-parent a child with a woman who tried to steal my life? Christine, I'm not finished. Her voice was shaking now, but only slightly, the way a tree shakes in a wind that is not strong enough to break it but is strong enough to remind it that it is not immovable. I'm not finished, and I'm not going to be finished for a long time. And I need you to know that what you did in that hotel room in Atlantic City, what you've been doing every night for 2 years in that apartment in University City, it was not a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to set the alarm. A mistake is running late for a meeting. What you did was a choice. You made a choice every single time to walk into that apartment and take off your clothes and lie next to another woman and call it something other than what it was. Every time you chose it. And I need you to understand that I know the difference, and I'm never going to unknow it, and that's going to be between us for the rest of our lives. She stood up. She picked up her wine glass and her book. She walked to the foot of the stairs and she stopped and she turned around. I'm going to bed, she said. I'm going to sleep in our bed, and you're going to sleep wherever you want in this house except our bed. And tomorrow morning, we're going to get up and make Jake's breakfast and drive him to school and go to work and come home and do this again. And we're going to keep doing this every day until one of us knows what we want. And that's it. That's the plan. She went upstairs. Michael heard the guest room door close. He sat in the living room in the dark for a long time. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday evening in April, Christine came home from work and found Michael sitting at the kitchen table with a manila folder in front of him. The folder contained a document that his lawyer had prepared, a post-nuptial agreement that would, in the event of a future divorce, ensure that the majority of their assets would go to Christine and Jake. It was not a punishment. It was a gesture. It was Michael saying, in the only language that a man who has already taken so much can speak in, I know I have already taken too much from you, and then this is the only thing I have left to give. Christine set her bag down on the chair. She looked at the folder. She looked at Michael. What's this? It's an agreement. A post-nup. My lawyer drew it up. If we stay married and something happens later, if, God forbid, we can't make this work despite everything I'm going to try to you, it protects you. It protects Jake. It makes sure that you and he are not displaced from this house, that your financial security is not contingent on whatever happens with me and he struggled with the word. My situation. Christine sat down. She opened the folder. She read the document. She read it slowly, all of it, and Michael watched her face as she processed each pause, each paragraph, each carefully constructed sentence that his lawyer had written to ensure that Christine Warren and her son would be cared for regardless of what Michael Warren did or failed to do. She closed the folder. I'm not signing this, she said. Michael's heart dropped. Christine, I'm not signing it because I don't need it. I don't need your guilt money. I don't need a legal document to protect me from you. If I stay in this marriage, I'm staying because I choose to, not because you've paid me to. And if I leave this marriage, I'm leaving because I can't survive what's happened, not because you made it financially impossible to stay. She pushed the folder back across the table. If you want to prove that you're serious about making this work, if you want to demonstrate that you're not just protecting your own interests while pretending to care about mine, then put the house in my name. Not as part of a divorce settlement. Now. Today. Transfer the deed. Put it in Christine Warren's name only. That's how you show me you're serious. Not a postnup that protects us in a future divorce, but a deed that protects me in the marriage we're supposedly trying to save. Michael looked at the folder on the table. He looked at his wife. I'll call my lawyer tomorrow, he said. Christine nodded. She picked up the folder and she stood and she walked to the garbage can in the corner of the kitchen and she dropped the folder in and she compressed it with the heel of her palm until it was flat against the bottom of the can. And then she turned around and she went upstairs and she did not close the guest room door, and Michael sat alone in the kitchen and he understood, for the first time in his life, what it actually meant to earn something, to earn the right to be in someone's presence, to earn the trust that had been given to him and that he had spent 2 years systematically destroying. He went to the lawyer on Friday. The deed to the house was transferred into Christine's name only. It took 45 minutes. He signed documents that he barely understood and paid fees that seemed disproportionate to the simplicity of the transaction and walked out of the office into the late April sunshine with a feeling in his chest that he could not name, something between grief and relief, loss and the strange, disorienting lightness of having done the right thing too late. Christine received the confirmation in the mail on Tuesday. She called him at work and he saw her name on his phone and his heart seized, and he answered, and she said, I got it. Okay. Thank you. She hung up. It was not forgiveness. It was not reconciliation. It was not the beginning of a new chapter in their marriage or the renewal of vows or any of the things that people in movies say to each other after a betrayal and expect to feel whole as a result. It was a middle-aged woman in Philadelphia acknowledging that her husband had done a single, concrete, unambiguous thing that demonstrated, if not love, then at least the recognition of a debt that could not be repaid in any other currency. And for Michael Warren, standing in his corner office on the 32nd floor with the view of the river and the morning light coming through the glass and his phone still warm in his hand, it was the first moment in his adult life when he had understood that love was not a feeling. It was not a performance. It was not the thing you did in the hotel rooms and apartments of other women when your real life became too quiet and too demanding and too ordinary to satisfy the appetite for aliveness that you had allowed to curdle into something dangerous. Love was the coffee maker timer. Love was the fraying cuffs on the old sweatshirt. Love was the bowl in the dishwasher and the oak tree in the backyard and the sound of your son saying "love you, Dad" as he walked out the door. Love was patient and unspectacular, and it did not make you feel extraordinary. It made you feel responsible. And the only way to honor it was to show up every day for the rest of your life and do the work of being the person that the people who loved you believed you to be. Vanessa had their daughter in September. She named her Lily. She sent Michael a photograph through her lawyer, a formal, legally neuter image of a newborn with dark hair and sealed eyes, and Michael printed it and he put it in his desk drawer and he looked at it every day, and he thought about the girl who would grow up without him in her house, without the noise of his family around her, without Jake as her brother and Christine as her stepmother and the life in the suburbs as her home. She would grow up in a one-bedroom apartment in University City with a mother who loved her with a ferocity that Michael did not doubt for a single second, because he had seen that ferocity in action, because Vanessa had burned down her entire life for the chance to have this child, and that kind of love, that terrifying, consuming, almost violent love, was the only kind Vanessa knew how to give. And Michael would pay child support. He would attend birthdays when they were arranged and he was available. He would send books and clothes and, when Lily was old enough, he would sit across a table from her and explain, as honestly as he could, the circumstances of her existence, the mistake, the betrayal, the series of choices that had led to her being born into a situation that no child should have to inherit. He would tell her the truth. All of it. Because that was the only thing he had left to offer his daughter, the truth, delivered on time, without the cushions of comfortable lies and self-serving justifications, the truth that her father was a man who had made an extraordinary series of cowardly choices and had then, at great cost, found the courage to stop making them. Whether that would be enough, whether Lily would look at him and see a father worth loving or a man who had failed everyone who trusted him, remained to be seen. But for now, in the kitchen of the house that belonged to Christine, on a Tuesday evening in October, with Jake upstairs doing homework and the coffee maker already set for tomorrow morning, Michael Warren washed the dinner dishes and put them in the dishwasher and wiped down the counter and folded the dish towel and hung it on the oven handle, and he did not feel like a hero, and he did not feel like a villain, and he did not feel like a man who had been redeemed or saved or transformed. He felt like a man who was, for the first time in 47 years, exactly where he was supposed to be. And he stayed. The following Saturday, Michael drove to University City for his weekly visit with Lily. The ritual had become established over the preceding months, a pattern that had emerged from the wreckage of his choices and taken on the weight of something almost sacred. He arrived at noon. He stayed until 4. He fed Lily her bottle, played with her on the blanket Vanessa had spread on the living room floor, watched her discover the particular joy of grabbing her own feet and pulling them to her mouth with the delighted surprise of a creature who had just learned something extraordinary about her own body. She was 11 months old now. She had 2 teeth, both on the bottom, and she grinned when she saw Michael now, a real grin, not the blank, uncomprehending stare of infancy, but the specific, targeted smile of recognition. She knew him. She was glad when he came. And every Saturday, when she smiled at him like that, Michael felt something in his chest that he could only describe as the opposite of the feeling he had carried for 2 years, the secret, corrosive weight of a man living a double life. This was lighter. This was cleaner. This was the feeling of being known by someone who expected nothing from him except presence. She likes the red block, Vanessa said. They were sitting on the floor together, watching Lily investigate the world with the methodical intensity of a baby who had decided that everything was interesting and nothing was to be trusted until it had been thoroughly examined. The yellow one bores her. She'll take it, but she won't smile. Any particular reason? She's colorblind. It's too early to tell, but I think she's red-green colorblind, like my father. Vanessa shrugged. Not a big deal. She'll manage. Michael watched Lily put the red block in her mouth, gum it thoughtfully, decide it was not edible, and discard it with the precise air of a critic rejecting a submitted manuscript. She was developing opinions, preferences, a personality that was emerging, day by day, from the fog of infancy into something recognizable, something individual, something that was hers alone. What do you think she'll be like? Michael asked. When she's older. Vanessa considered the question. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her back against the couch, her hair pulled up in a ponytail that emphasized the angle of her jaw and the particular set of her mouth, which was neither smiling nor frowning but simply present, a face in repose, waiting. Stubborn, Vanessa said. She'll be stubborn. She gets that from me. I was a stubborn child. My mother used to say I was so stubborn that if I fell into a river, I'd argue with the current until it apologized. Michael laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him. He could not remember the last time he had laughed at something Vanessa said. 2 years ago, maybe. In the early months, when the affair was still new and Vanessa was still performing the role of the woman who admired him, who laughed at his jokes and found his opinions fascinating and never challenged him on anything. Do you miss it? He asked. The performing. The early days when everything felt easy? Vanessa finished. No, I don't miss it. It was exhausting. Pretending to be someone I thought you wanted me to be, instead of someone I actually was. I spent 2 years trying to be the woman you deserved, and I forgot, somewhere along the way, to actually be that woman. I was just playing her on stage. And now I don't have to play anyone. Vanessa reached over and picked up Lily, who protested the interruption of her block investigation with a shriek of displeasure. Now I'm just Lily's mother. That's enough. That's more than enough. Michael watched Vanessa settle Lily on her lap, Lily's back against Vanessa's stomach, both of them facing Michael like a small, inseparable unit. They had the same dark eyes, the same set of the jaw, the same particular way of looking at him, directly, without evasion, with a kind of frank assessment that Michael had once found unsettling and had now come to appreciate as honest. I want to be there for her, Michael said. Not just on Saturdays. I want to be part of her life in a real way. He paused. He was not sure how to say what he wanted, because what he wanted was complicated, tangled up with Christine and the house in the suburbs and the question of whether his marriage would survive, and none of those things were things he could offer Vanessa or Lily without Christine's consent. What do you want? Vanessa asked. Specifically, I want Lily to know me. I want her to know that she has a father who shows up, who remembers her birthday, who is there when she needs something. I don't want to be a check. I don't want to be a name on a custody agreement. I want to be a father. For her. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. Lily was squirming on her lap, trying to escape toward the blocks, and Vanessa was holding her back with one hand while she thought. You can be that, she said, finally. You can show up. You can remember her birthday. You can be there. But you can't ask me to pretend that this is a normal family situation, because it isn't. You have a wife who hasn't forgiven you. You have a son who doesn't know his father has a daughter. You have a life that I'm not part of and don't want to be part of. And Lily is going to grow up in the middle of all that. She's going to be the child who has 2 houses, 2 families, 2 different worlds. She's going to have to learn how to navigate that in a way that most children never have to. I know. Do you? Because I need you to understand something, Michael. I made mistakes. I did things I shouldn't have done to get what I wanted. And I have to live with that for the rest of my life. But Lily doesn't have to live with my mistakes. Lily gets to be her own person. She gets to have a relationship with you that isn't defined by what I did to get her. She gets to decide, when she's old enough, whether she wants to know you, whether she wants to be part of your family, whether she wants to spend time with your son or your wife or anyone else. And I need you to respect that. I need you to let her decide. And I need you to not put her in the position of having to choose between her mother and her father, or between her real family and her. She stopped. Her voice had gotten tight, and Michael could see that she was close to tears, holding them back through an active will that was visible in the set of her jaw and the deliberate steadiness of her breathing. Her other family, Michael finished. She's going to have 2 families. And she's going to have to figure out how to love both of them, even when they don't speak to each other, even when they can't be in the same room together, even when the circumstances of her birth are something that no one talks about openly. Yes. Vanessa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. That's what I'm asking you to prepare for. Not the Kodak moments. Not the birthday parties and the Sunday visits and the graduation ceremonies where everyone smiles for the camera. The hard part. The part where Lily is 16 and angry and asks you why you didn't choose her mother. The part where Jake finds out he has a sister and doesn't know how to feel about it. The part where Christine has to sit in the same room with me at Lily's wedding and pretend that we're all one big happy family. I'll be there, Michael said. For all of it. Whatever she needs, whenever she needs it. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Vanessa nodded. She bounced Lily on her lap, and Lily shrieked with pleasure, and the moment passed, the heaviness lifting, the air returning to the room, the ordinary business of a Saturday afternoon with a baby resuming its cheerful, undemanding course. Stay for dinner, Vanessa said. I'm making pasta. Nothing fancy. But Lily likes it when you stay for dinner. So Michael stayed. He stayed for pasta and for the bath that followed and for the bedtime ritual that Vanessa had developed, a thong, always the same one, that Lily fell asleep to every night. Michael stood in the doorway of Lily's room and watched Vanessa sing to her daughter, and he thought about the life that Lily was going to live, the complicated, imperfect, full of divisions life that he had created for her by making the choices he had made. It was not the life he would have chosen for her. It was not the life any parent would choose for their child. But it was her life, and she would live it, and he would be there, showing up, remembering her birthday, being present in the hard moments and the easy ones, and he would let her decide, when she was old enough, what to make of the father he was trying to become. He drove home at 8. Christine was in the living room, reading. She looked up when he came in, and her expression was the same as it always was, careful, guarded, neither warm nor cold but attentively neutral, watching for the moment when she would need to defend herself from whatever he might say or do next. How was Lily? Christine asked. Good. She's getting her second tooth. She's starting to pull herself up on furniture. That's good. Christine went back to her book. There's leftover soup in the refrigerator if you're hungry. Michael stood in the doorway of the living room. He looked at his wife, his wife of 22 years, the woman he had promised to love and honor and protect, the woman he had betrayed in the most intimate and personal way possible. And he felt, as he always did when he came back from seeing Lily, a complicated mixture of love and guilt and a strange, tentative hope that was so fragile that he was almost afraid to look at it directly. "I'm going to eat," he said. "And then I'm going to come back in here and sit with you, if that's okay. I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to sit." Christine looked up from her book again. She studied him for a moment, and he could see her deciding whether this was a manipulation, whether sitting in the same room with her was an attempt to pressure her into intimacy she wasn't ready for, or whether it was simply what he said it was, presence offered without expectation. "That's fine," she said, finally. "There's room in the chair." So Michael ate his soup, and he came back to the living room, and he sat in the chair next to Christine's, and neither of them spoke, and they stayed that way for an hour, Christine reading, Michael staring at the ceiling, the television off, the house quiet except for the sound of Jake's music bleeding faintly through the floor from upstairs. It was not intimacy. It was not reconciliation. It was not even, really, companionship, because companionship requires a mutuality that they had not yet achieved. But it was something. It was two people in the same room, choosing to be present with each other, choosing not to be alone, choosing, despite everything, to keep trying. And for Michael Warren, who had spent 2 years running from the silence and the ordinary and the quiet of his own life, sitting in that chair next to his wife in the dark was the bravest thing he had ever done. He stayed until 11. Then he went upstairs, and he lay down on the side of the bed, and he listened to the house, and in the morning he woke up and did it again, the ordinary, impossible, necessary work of staying,